Welcome to the DRF Sports Podcast, brought to you by DRF Sports. America's most trusted name in horse racing is now providing sports bettors with exclusive data, analytics, previews, videos, and expert picks on all major sports. Bet smarter and have more fun doing it. It's the DRF Sports Podcast, and now your host, Sheldon Alexander. Ready, set, bet.
This is the DRF Sports Podcast, episode 87. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander, with a special reminder to like and subscribe to our YouTube page so that you never miss any of our expert betting, insights, and analysis, especially for an episode like this where we're talking golf majors. It's the US Open. More on that in a sec, but first, hey, Iowa, DRF Sportsbook is sending all parlays to the moon. Start cashing in with DRF Sportsbook's 22% profit boost for all MLB, NBA, or NHL parlays. The MLB season is here, and along with the NBA playoffs and the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, so it's time to celebrate, and we want to boost your profits. So head over to the DRF Sportsbook now and start betting. Must be physically present in Iowa to wager. So as mentioned, it's another major week in the golf world. Lots going on. We're talking about Live. We're talking about Club Live. We're talking about the US Open, of course, and who can win, top 20 picks, all that fun stuff. Lots of insight, lots of deep dives into the numbers because we're trying to find the best value to help you win some money. And of course, our guy Matt Russell stops by to give you all the whole grain goodness as usual. And luckily for y'all, that starts right about now. And things are super hot right now in the sports world. Not only do we have the NBA finals, not only do we have the Stanley Cup finals, but we also have the US Open. And despite having the same name, I feel like the golf world is hotter than it is at Club Live in Miami. I'll let you connect those dots on your own. But lots going on in the golf world right now. And the US Open, my guy Matt Russell is here to break it all down. How you doing, my dude?
I'm good, man. Just getting a little feisty right off the hop. I like it.
Hey, man, I didn't do it. I'm just here writing intros, man. I didn't do it. Don't blame me. I didn't take the anyways.
Yeah.
Anyways, my point is lots going on. We're talking US Open, the season's third major. And we start every golf preview when we talk about the majors with the simple question: where's Tiger?
Yeah. And this is the easy one, right? There's gonna be a lot of harder questions coming here very soon. Tiger's not here. Tiger is out. He doesn't want to be involved with all your shenanigans, golf universe. He doesn't want to answer any stupid questions, yada yada yada. No,
Tiger might be at Club Live. Maybe there's a chance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's anywhere but here, essentially, right? In Brookline, Massachusetts, essentially. Which is great, honestly. Like, quick note, and it's going to sort of inform our betting when we get around to the Open Championship, because Tiger has a chance to win the Open, British Open at St. Andrews, right? And he knows that, right? He knows that it's a flat walk. It's much easier than the two super hilly courses that he's played, Augusta National and Southern Hills. And he knows that he's got a chance at a place that he's won, before, that he loves, that he knows like the back of his hand, as well as you can know one of those courses that are obviously very unpredictable, but he knows he's got a chance to win that. And there's no reason for him to traipse around Brookline and the country club at Brookline to bother, right? Like why put yourself through that? The British Open is coming around the corner very quickly. And then the added bonus, he doesn't get to talk about the stuff that everybody wants to talk about.
And how could you turn down $1 billion?
Well, if you already have $1 billion, I guess it
stupid.
Helps.
I'm being stupid.
Listen,
I'm being stupid. I know.
The man's gone through a divorce. Like, it's impressed that he has $1 billion, right? That news was obviously leaked last week. And I don't know that was necessarily a coincidence that it was like, hey, a golfer could be a billionaire who plays on the PGA Tour, everybody. Like, it's a thing that could happen. Because obviously, you asked me the easy question on like, what's up with Tiger? The hard question is, what are Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, Sergio like go down the line. Like, what are they doing here? Hey, I thought you guys left, right? And so that, we might as well get that out of the way first. We can get into like how absurd the whole thing is and like the politics and everything behind it, right? But like people had to make their own decisions, and like, guess what? People aren't going to change their minds on things, right? Like that's just how the world works. And but like, the only thing I want to say is like, are we surprised that people are taking money? Like that's a shocker. Well, that's it. Like, right. It's, again, moral compass and all that fun stuff. I'm not going to try to put my morality onto professional athletes or like, do you know what I mean? Like, and it's just like, we're acting all surprised. Like, oh my God, I can't believe they would go do this. It's like, nah, really? Yeah. Well, I'll say about this is one of the great lines.
That's no statement on whether or not I think they should be doing it or not. That's not what I'm saying here.
Well, I mean, I'll go a little bit deeper. Like, it's, a Woody Allen line that I believe is a Groucho Marx line, right? And it's I'd never want to be part of a club that would have somebody like me as a member, right? And so essentially what that means, or sort of how I look at that, is I go, okay, like, let's take a look at the club that, you mentioned Club Live, right? Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at this club. Patrick Reed, Bryson DeChambeau, Dustin Johnson, Phil Mickelson, Sergio Garcia. Like this is team viral video, right? Of like cheating, doing sketchy stuff, like being annoying, being petulant. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is not a group that is like, I don't really, this is a bad hang, right? These guys are bad hangs. I don't want to hang out with any one of those dudes. Like maybe Phil, like at the sports book, something along those lines, right? Like that's probably a decent hang. That's probably a fun scene. Dustin Johnson.
Actually, you probably don't want his bad gambling vibes, actually. Probably don't want those vibes, right?
True. I just read or had, it's an ebook, I guess it's called, or audiobook. I audiobooked the recent biography on Phil, and the betting, this is a betting podcast. The betting stories on Phil are quite entertaining. So check that out. All that is to say, this is a betting podcast. Like we're looking to handicap the US Open, and like, what do we do with these guys? And so for me, I'm not touching any of these guys to have success with the 10-foot pole. And this isn't like a bitterness thing about like, oh, like they're going away from like my PGA Tour, because I have a ton of complaints about PGA Tour proper, right? It's why the majors are so great, because they are not run by the PGA Tour, right? You get a different vibe with each one, and you have different organizers for each one. But the reason that we're not betting on any of these live guys here to play well is because when I think about it, what does it take to play well and to win, to beat 150 others, to beat, the 40 or 50 other guys who are capable of winning at these tough courses against this tough competition? Well, in my opinion, you have to be competitive, right? Like that's kind of important. You have to be desperate, right? You have to be competitively desperate. You have to be working, right? You have to be locked in, tuned in. You have to work on your game over and over and over again. And you need to be mentally ready. You need to be relaxed, right? But like competitively, intensely relaxed, right? You can't have tension. You can't have unnecessary stress. Okay. Be competitive, be desperate. How shall, again, beyond the morality, let's say, the Tooth Fairy came and showed up and dropped 20 million. How about 10 million? How about 5 million on your doorstep? With apologies to your day job, how locked in would you be going to work the very next day, right? And beyond the fact that like, okay, our day jobs aren't necessarily the most like grinding, and we don't have, we're not working on our game 24/7 and all of that sort of thing. Like in general, how locked in is the general public if they have so much as a vacation the next week? That last Friday before your vacation, are you going to be super locked into that? If you're getting this bag, hundreds, tens of millions of dollars, depending on who you are, how locked in are you to applying your trade, knowing that that money is guaranteed? We saw it last week at the Live Golf event. Not that, I was super locked into watching it, but like Charles Schwartzel wins because nobody else really cares about winning, right? Like the money's already there. And like, it would be cool to get another 4 million. But if you're Dustin Johnson, you're already getting 125 sent your way. Phil Mickelson, 200 million or whatever it is sent your way. Like how locked in are you going to be? So the other one is like be tuned in, right? These guys, by the way, not just like they've been sitting at home eating, Cheetos, like they've also been busy, like making deals and like changing their lives in a lot of cases, right? Like how tuned in are they? And then the next element is relax. We've already seen some shots from the range. Like speaking of, hangs that I don't want to be involved in, Kevin Na getting like cold shouldered by the Jordan Spieths of the world, right? Like it's got to be super awkward for these guys to show up a week after just turncoating on their friends, right? Like this is a collective. This PGA Tour is a collective. There's a viral video from the PGA Tour that showed the final group, Tony Finau, Justin Thomas and Rory McIlroy before that final round at the Canadian Open. And like, yeah, they're not chatty necessarily in the locker room, but like they're kind of joking around. They're saying stuff. Hey, like, we're going to avoid the rain today. Like, blah, blah, blah. Like this is a group, like a cohort that like travels together, right? Like they hang out together. Like they live in the same neighborhood so that they can play golf against each other for maybe some cash, privately, separately from the tour. And so like, there's these guys who are just like, nah, man, like I'm out, see you later. And if people have different moral beliefs and like, yeah, I'd rather hang out with a lot of those guys who stayed on the tour. Right. And so these guys are going to come in and it's super awkward. It's uncomfortable, right? There's other stuff occupying their mind other than winning this US Open, which I think adds an extra twist to it. Now, how does that reflect us from a betting standpoint? Well, one, there's going to be some value on some of these guys to miss the cut. Dustin Johnson to miss the cut, right? So listen, Phil, you're not going to get a ton of value on Phil. He's 300-1 to win the thing, right? Like he is expected to miss the cut, and we're all going to have a good laugh if and when Phil misses the cut. But like that was the expectation for somebody who was 51 years old. Now I realize he won the PGA Championship last year at 50 years old, so I'm not saying that just because of his age situation. I'm saying that because of his situation, right? Bryson DeChambeau, we've been fading Bryson to miss the cut every time he's played this year, and it's become quite lucrative because of an injury issue, but also maybe it's upstairs as well. Maybe this stuff is bothering somebody who seems like something of a sensitive soul. All these guys who went to live did so to grab a last second check, right? A last second check on their career. Sergio Garcia was not going to win any more majors, right? So it doesn't really matter that maybe he eventually gets banned from certain majors, all the majors, who knows? So there's some opportunities there in the miscut markets on basically anybody who jumped ship. Also, the odds are getting posted. They are getting a piece of the win probability pie, which just by nature makes everybody else a little bit more valuable, right? If you have to assign a piece of the pie to all of these other guys, Dustin Johnson, for example, I think something along the lines of like 20, 25-1, like if you're going to assign that win probability to a guy who just hasn't played very well all season long and is gone for the cash for whatever his reasons are, like that's going to benefit everybody else. So I'm going to chop them out of the pie. And what that's going to create essentially is a smaller hold for the sports book. Because if I just think that's a gray area for those, that means instead of a 20% hold that your sportsbook's taking, now all of a sudden they're taking a 10% hold, right? And so like that doesn't necessarily help us predict who's going to win the tournament, but it means that every bet that we make is going to theoretically be more valuable. Now, if somebody from Live Golf wins, or somebody takes, if 3 or 4 guys take a top 20 position, which means there's less top 20 positions available to other guys, then we'll tip our cap and we'll go, you know what? We lost this one. We missed out on this one. It doesn't necessarily mean we lost a bet necessarily, right? But it just means our part of our handicap was wrong. Well, that's going to happen sometimes too, right? But you need something going in. So the other element in all of this is, how are we going to bet on the guys that are left?
Can I ask a question though first about just to wrap up the live thing? Because as you're talking about it, I was getting serious like NWO, WCW vibes from my childhood. Sure. But my question is for you, because I'm not a huge golf guy. I have no idea about a lot of things involving golf. But one thing I want to know is, do the fans care? Because but I'm saying like the fans in attendance. Because what I'm saying is, obviously fans cheering or booing and all that has somewhat of an effect on people playing. So I'm saying, like, do the fans care enough to where like that can impact how a guy is playing in the tournament? Because, he's getting chirped the whole day while he's like walking down the course. Like, is that a thing or not? Like, I'm saying this having no idea at all.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think that, that would, if I threw that into a category, that would be the sort of mental element. Yeah. Like, is Phil Mickelson going to get the same like reception that he gets all of the time? Right. Yeah. With which, again, who knows, right? How many strokes gained fandom, right? Like who's to ever know what that necessarily means? Like Patrick Reed, like, again, was he ever going to make the cut in the first place? Maybe, maybe not. But like, he is a target at the best of times. Bryson is a target at the best of times too. And and you don't want to gauge things by social media because God knows that's like the absolute depths of human society. But like, you never know, man. Like, some people are like okay with this. And I just wonder, like, again, from not trying to get deeply into the political scene, but like, I'm sorry, man, I object to like mass slaughters and human rights violations. Sorry. You know what I mean? And like, I know you do too. And I know like we talk about the Masters and you're not like crazy about the Masters because of historical reasons. And like, but at least there's a development there and like, and it's sort of a tacit attempt to like get modern. There is no development here when it comes to Saudi Arabia, right? Like this is, the terms getting thrown around like almost overly, but like, it's true, sports washing, right? Like the point of all of this isn't to make money. Right? They're not giving these guys 200 million and giving away tickets to their event and not having sponsors and not having commercials because that's going to be financially viable, right? Like that's the reason this exists, is to make that other stuff go away. Now, I'd like to think that that's actually not where it's actually working in reverse, where it's shining more of a light on it, right? Because otherwise we would never be talking about Saudi Arabia. Yes. But the interesting thing to me is from a timing standpoint, right? It's like, if this happened 20 years ago, in 2002, do you think any of these guys would go? Right? They wouldn't go because of 9/11, right? And the fact that it's 20 years later, does that make it okay all of a sudden? Right? And it's like, I would like to think that the crowd at the US Open would reflect that. And this isn't in New York, it's in Boston. I see what you're saying. Like Boston was on, was on the map too, right? And so like, hopefully that stuff ties in and isn't forgotten. Now, is that reflected in the crowd being noticeably, negative towards those? And do they care? Does that something? Because again, when we talk about part of the club, right? Like, these are also, they might not just be bad hangs. They might just be impervious to people not liking them because people have not liked them for their entire lives, right? They just might be those dudes who are just on a different vibe, on a different wavelength than like most of us in regular society who are sort of, by the book. We don't cheat in golf like we, whatever else, right? Like this, it's it's hard to say, but it has to be an element. And again, like, I will assign that to that category. And I just think that all of these guys can't be trusted, period, but also can't be trusted from a betting standpoint. Right. So that's where it's like cross, and it makes it easier because otherwise, like, Dustin Johnson's a tough guy to cross off when he's, especially when he's playing well, which isn't necessarily the case now. Bryson's a tough guy because you never know what you're going to get week to week, right? Some of these other guys could pop up at any given time. It's just an easier way for me to cross off some of the other, big names, guys who might get a ticket, out of me at some point, in the past, not anymore.
For sure. And as we move on to like the contenders and like who might be the favorite, and I know this because it was a Canadian Open, so it was filling up my timeline for sure. Your man's Rory, who probably was gaining a lot more fans because it's not like he was shying away from the controversy, even though, it was kind of a slick shot there in his post.
Great shot.
Right. Loved it. I liked it. Hey, I'm a fan of the NBA. So of course I love that stuff. Right.
Yes.
So if you give me more of that in golf, hey, you might have me here tuning in. But is Rory really the guy here that you're looking at in terms of who's the favorite?
Yeah, I think he's the understandable favorite, right? Because we always just decide, okay, who's the guy that we like most right now? And I think when it comes to this event, there's sort of, two elements that we'll talk about a little bit later. But of course, one of those is like, when it comes to the betting market, like, okay, who's playing really well, right? Because we've gone into the last two majors with Rahm and Scottie Scheffler as being the favorite, right? In the PGA Championship. Well, Scottie Scheffler won the Masters. That's why. And Rahm's numbers are always really, really great. He's sort of like, for a long time, widely considered the best player in the world. We just have sort of gotten to a point where that kind of hasn't been the case, right? So Rahm has dipped down into the sort of second and third choice or third, fourth choice, because Rory is the favorite here at 10-1, and Justin Thomas, not surprisingly, right, if he ends up winning that tournament last week, Justin Thomas is going to be the favorite. And that tournament was tied with 2 holes to go, right? And so they both hit kind of honestly crappy drives going into the 17th hole. And Justin Thomas, like his one was just like slightly in a slightly worse position than McIlroy's was, and he wasn't able to save par, whereas Rory was. And so like the point is, like, that's a very slight differentiator between those two guys, especially since Thomas won the last major, right? He won the PGA Championship. So like either of those guys could have been the favorite. Rory gets the nod because of him literally winning what is essentially a 2-hole, tournament last week, a 1-on-1 tournament essentially with Thomas. And so I get why he's 10-1. Listen, he's not new to being the favorite, right? Like this isn't the first for Rory McIlroy. Problem is that he has not won one of these for a very long time. Right. And so what won Rory the tournament last week was his wedge game, not something that Rory is necessarily known for. Right. He just happened to have it dialed in Canada the last week. Is he going to have that same luck? Again, I use luck as sort of a, throwaway term here. Is he going to have the same skill? He's going to be as dialed. Is he going to have that same setup for Brookline? Of course, that's going to play differently than St. George's did. And everybody got caught up because St. George's are like, oh, the rough is long. This is going to like a lot like the US Open is going to be. Yeah, but they're like, the fairways were also mega wide, right? And like guys who are hitting fairways could get to the greens like pretty easily, or get to the pins, I should say, very easily. And like, that's not going to be the case, right? This is going to be a tournament where like -4 wins it. This isn't going to be -20 wins it. And so I'm certainly not, as much as I go and okay, like, yeah, Rory's in, some of the best form, obviously second place at the Masters and has had a good run here. Like it makes a ton of sense for him to be the favorite, but like, it's not a situation where you just can't punch any holes in Rory, right? Like it's at 10-1. I don't really want anything to do with, kind of anybody in this field, right? It isn't necessarily just a Rory thing. Justin Thomas at 12-1, right? Like I happen to like Justin Thomas's game as far as like it travels a little bit better than a McIlroy's does, right? Thomas can win a -20 type of tournament. He can also win a -4 type of tournament. If I had to pick between the two, I would take Thomas. Part of that is like taking, the advantage of getting a little bit of value, right? In head-to-head matchups, I want Thomas instead of McIlroy because I think it's a toss-up between those two guys. And the market here is showing favoritism, obviously, towards McIlroy. So between those two, I'd rather have those. Then you get the next two guys of Scheffler and Rahm, right? And again, like what has John Rahm done recently that is going to get me excited about betting him, right? Scottie Scheffler, always dangerous, always can just go off at any moment. He's really interesting. But by and large, across the board here, a little live betting reminder is like, we're probably going to be able to get a better price or a better value. And that doesn't necessarily mean better price. A lot of times that means betting a guy at +500 after a bunch of other guys missed the cut, right? We talk about the probability pie. Dustin Johnson, maybe there's a couple other like top names here that we can get to as far as who we're not going to bet on. But like, what if Rory just has a bad couple of days? And like Justin Thomas is +600 because he's 2 or 3 shots back. If McIlroy is out of this tournament, and fill in the blank, Scottie Scheffler, John Rahm, whomever, if one of these 4 guys is out of the tournament, then like that's going to add implicit value to the guys who are remaining. And so even though you're not necessarily getting the 10-1, 12-1 that you could have gotten before the first round, that still might be a bet worth making. And I think that's always the best way to play the majors. And, whether it sort of comes through with Justin Thomas on the final day, or whether it's a 2 or 3 round lead up where you want to grab somebody, mid Friday or, Saturday morning, something along those lines. That's how I like treating these favorites, these guys who, if they are close, can win, but there's also a possibility that they just don't have it for a couple of rounds. And now you're holding the bag on a, really not very valuable ticket at 10, 12, 14 to 1 for a guy who might miss the cut or might barely make the cut and be 10 shots back after 2 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, super interesting stuff going on. And you talk about just all the chaos that's going on between the whole NWO, WCW vibes, but also adding some more drama to this. We haven't seen a major at Brookline in a very long time, right?
Yeah, 1988, your man's Curtis Strange, your boy. Yeah, Curtis Strange. I think that was
familiar with his work. Yeah.
Yeah, he won 2 straight US Opens. I can't remember if that was his first of the 2. But Brookline more famous for the Ryder Cup in 1999, which is like a hilarious watch on Golf Channel because it's like the actual like turning point from the Tiger era, from like the pre-Tiger era to the post-Tiger era. Like obviously Tiger won in 1997 and won a bunch of majors in 99 and 2000. But like from a physique standpoint, it's a bunch of dumpy white dudes and Tiger. It's a bunch of guys in baggy pants and baggy shirts, and then and ugly visors everywhere, and like 45-year-old guys making the Ryder Cup. No one's in shape other than Tiger. And then after Tiger, right, it's like, oh guys, we got to get in the gym here, right? So even like the older guys were getting in there and working out. So all that is to say, it's been a long time since we've seen Brookline. And so you go, okay, what do we do when we don't have we don't have Augusta where it's every year? We don't even have like a Pebble or a Shinnecock where it's like every 5 years you're going to see a major at that location. Well, you try to find what is called a course fit, right? What is called a course similarity score. So other courses that require the same type of skills that this course does. So I'll give you a handful of them, right? So first and foremost, Pebble Beach is one of them. So again, different ways. There's no, ocean going up one side of the course here, but it requires the same sort of shots. Winged Foot 2 years ago hosted the US Open. This is going to be very similar. TPC Boston, a course that has hosted basically every second year a FedEx Cup playoff event at the end of the year. And then the strange one for me was the Honda Classic at PGA National, which is sort of an annual event in March, like has the same sort of characteristics as far as what it demands of a player. And so you want to use, obviously form being the other, right? So course fit and form. You want to use, okay, are these guys good at these types of courses? Because I have sort of this long-standing theory, like it's not even really all that long-standing for the last couple of years, like the same guys all kind of compete or are in contention, this little mini cluster of guys who like play well at these certain courses, right? So like Colin Morikawa, like he ends up, winning, and it's like always with the same kind of contenders, right? Like Louis Oosthuizen's involved and like that sort of thing. Meanwhile, like you get a different course and it's like a different crop of guys have a really good chance of winning, right? I think we could sign ourselves up for another Justin Thomas, Rory McIlroy duel. Like, I think that's a very reasonable thing and would be absolutely outstanding, sort of do a part 2 off of that. But there's just a handful of guys here that like, okay, they're playing really well. We don't want to overcomplicate things this time of year, right? We don't try to pull some guy out of the wilderness who's just like, oh man, he missed like 3 cuts, and like Dustin Johnson or, some of these other dudes who are just like, oh, he hasn't competed. He hasn't, contended. Like, you don't need to be too cool for this event. Sometimes you can just go, who's playing really well? Max Homa is playing really well. Right? Who's playing really well? Shane Lowry is playing really well. Obviously we talked about the guys who are getting credit for that at the top of the board. Matthew Fitzpatrick's playing well. Guess who's going to probably be really good this week? Will Zalatoris, right? Because 1, he's always good in the majors, and 2, he's also playing very well right now. Didn't compete at the Canadian Open, right? So he sort of gets to back of mind because we only think of guys who played well at the Canadian Open. Tony Finau, he's back all of a sudden to playing really well. And that's a guy who, from a course fit standpoint, like could play really well in this tournament. So you look at Zalatoris and you go, okay, he was 6th, tied for 6th at Winged Foot 2 years ago. He's first in short strokes gained approach, right? These are things that are going to come in handy. 3. He was 6th at the American Express at La Quinta, who's also another really good course fit. And I shout out datagolf.com because they have the course fit metrics and the course comparison stats as well, right? As far as like what the fit is. So, this course is 93%, this course it fits 91%, that sort of thing. So there's a handful of guys here that we're going to like, right? Lowry, Homa, Fitzpatrick, Zalatoris, Finau. Those are the sort of second tier guys that we're going to want to get into. But how are we going to bet them? Shell, we're not necessarily diving into the outright market because that can be a bit of a cesspool. We want to be hitting the top 20 market, right? We want to have a bunch of bets, preferably at plus money. And so the even money cut essentially for top 20 happens after ROM. So those first 4 guys are minus money to get into the top 20. Everybody below them are plus money to get into the top 20, right? So you get the Homa, Lowry, Fitzpatrick, Zalatoris, Finau group, all at plus 125 to plus 160. So if you bet all of those guys to finish in the top 20, you only really need 2 out of 5 for you to be profitable. 3 out of 5, you're really profitable. 4 out of 5, you're loving life, right? And if we can find those clusters like we did for the PGA Championship, you'll remember we had like 10 or 11 top 20s and we hit like 5 of them. And some of them were for plus 300, some of them were plus, 150. But like those add up quick and you end up sitting there going like, oh, we won 6 or 7 units just on top 20s alone, right? We didn't just dump all our money into the win outright market, right? So those are the types of guys here who are combining course fit with their form. And it's not, it's not like Augusta where it's like course history is important, because with Brookline, there just isn't course history. We just have to sort of, work our way around the fact that we don't have any course history by comparing it with some other places.
I got you. And I think it's super interesting when you have those memories that you can just see and now it gets dug up again because you're back at that course. It's like, oh, good times. There's some familiarity. It's like, is this going to bring up another moment? Who can be this year's Curtis Strange, for example? Like, I think that stuff's kind of cool.
Or one of your all-time favorite moments in golf. I know you remember it well, when Justin Leonard made the long putt to clinch the Ryder Cup at Brookline on the I believe it was the 17th hole. That one I know you talk about. I can't get you to stop talking about the 1999 Ryder Cup and the ridiculous shirts with all the pictures on it. You love it.
I was cashing out mad bets on that one. We'll get back to the pod in a sec, but first, be a pro and win. Introducing DRF Sports' all-new premium data feature on drf.com/sports. For $99 a year, which is just $8.25 a month, you can get industry-leading betting trends, angles, and analytics. With so many big sporting events here, it's the best way for you to make some money this postseason and have fun while doing it. That's DRF Sports Pro. Sign up now at drf.com/sports. So we talked about sort of favorites, but who are kind of like dark horses on this odds board?
Yeah, this is where we get not super deep into the weeds. We can get to the super deep into the weeds here, but a couple of dark horses. And God, I hate saying this because for a while he was like, he was the guy everybody was talking about as the dark horse. And I think I mentioned him in for the PGA Championship, and I think he immediately missed the cut. Daniel Berger, there's some nice course fit with Daniel Berger here. He's got he's at he sort of vanished for a little while and got off of people's radar. But a T5 in a sort of return, if you will, at Memorial. Now, Memorial isn't a particular course fit for Berger, but I know you're going to remember the old Honda Classic from earlier this year as we talk about PJ National. He finished 4th at the Honda Classic, but that was one where he was running away with that through 3 rounds and had sort of a really brutal Sunday. But the overarching point is like, he had a really good first 3 rounds at a course that we, sort of associate with this course. 14th in strokes gained approach. So again, his stats are really good, even though the results haven't necessarily caught up. And again, he's 50-1 to win. I don't necessarily think Daniel Berger is going to all of a sudden win this tournament, but once you get into that 50-1 range, that means you get into the sort of the plus 200 or higher range as far as a top 20 is concerned. You're going to recall Mito Pereira, right? one hole away from winning the PGA Championship. And I think a lot of people, including myself, certainly in the next round or the next tournament that he played, thought that that was just going to be it. And we were never going to see poor Mito Pereira ever again because we didn't really know all that much about Mito Pereira. And the funny thing is, with all this live golf stuff and the European Tour, DP World Tour situation, like, okay, what's going on there? The thing that I'm starting to really sort of wrap my head around is the idea that the Korn Ferry Tour, essentially the North American minor league of the PGA Tour, might be the second best tour in the world, right? Because that's where you get the up and coming guys coming in. And Mito Pereira qualified through the Korn Ferry Tour to be, a rookie this year. And as much as we thought he was going to fall off in these last, after, post Southern Hills, his next two tournaments, tied for 7th, tied for 13th. Mito Pereira is not going anywhere. He's 7th on the PGA Tour in saves out of the rough. That's going to be an issue. And he's 10th in strokes gained approach, which means 10th in strokes gained approach means he's probably going to be on the green. These are small greens at Brookline. He's going to be on the green more than most. And when he's in the rough, he's pretty good at getting out of the rough. And so again, I'm not dying to bet him to win the tournament. I don't want to have a ticket on him necessarily as he's sitting on the tee on the 72nd hole. Like, that could get ugly again. But I think this is a guy that you shouldn't be surprised if he is back atop or near the top of the leaderboard here. And again, at 66-1 for his derivative markets, right? You get into the top 20s, and now we're talking plus 300 type prices for Mito Pereira to again be in the top 20. And then Davis Riley, 80-1. Again, don't necessarily think Davis Riley is going to win this tournament, but he's got 6 straight top 20s. Did you know that, Shell? Did you know that? Did you know that Davis Riley has 6 straight top 20s? Now, again, this is a different animal, right? But one of those top 20s was the PGA Championship, right? So he has shown that he can get it done on the major stage as far as what our requirement is going to be of Davis Riley, right? And so now you're getting into that zone of 80-1. So now we're talking in the plus 300s for a top 20 for Davis Riley. So there's sort of that dark horse neighborhood where, honestly, if they won, I wouldn't be surprised. But you shouldn't be surprised if they are literally in that first page of the leaderboard come Sunday.
Yeah. And I mean, once we look at that way, in terms of like the dark horses, is there an opportunity for a big long shot, maybe not to win, but for the top 20?
Yeah. And this is where you get into the, just give me one of these guys to finish in the top 20, because these are all guys who are priced between plus 550 and plus 650 in the top 20 market. And we'll start with Lucas Herbert, your mans, Australian, tied for 31st at Winged Foot. And you're saying, tied for 31st, that's not going to get it done. Point is, he was in the mix for a top 20 2 years ago at Winged Foot. He's made 2 cuts since a tied for 13th at the PGA Championship. So there we go. Now we've got ourselves a top 20 in the major for old Lucas, right? So he's played well in a similar course in a major a couple of years ago, and then played well in a major in the last major that we saw. He's 16th in strokes gained around the green, right? So again, you miss the green. How are we getting up and down here? How are we saving shots so that we don't get mega bombed off of the planet here? He's 200-1, which of course means something in the plus 550 to plus 600 range for a top 20. He literally just had a top 20 at the PGA Championship. A couple of more here. Your boy Adri Arnaus. Okay. The Spanish sensation. All right. 30th at the PGA Championship, basically peppering the European Tour. He's sort of, I always have to have a European Tour guy that I think is going to play well on U.S. soil and then almost never does. Let's go ahead and add Adri Arnaus to that for this case. And then Ryan Fox, 200-1 here in 6 DP World Tour, i.e. the European Tour events. He's got 5 top 10s out of those 6 events. I think his worst event was 15th, something along those lines. And at the PGA Championship, this was his 4-round scoring: 70, 70, 70, and 77. But those first three rounds, 70, 70, and 70 at a tough Southern Hills course were impressive. Don't really know what happened to our boy Ryan Fox here at 77 for that final round. But I digress. Those 3 guys, again, just give me one of those and we end up, up 3 to 4 units, depending on who cashes, given that they'll be in the plus 550 to plus 600 range. And honestly, if you get deep into the weeds as far as the head-to-head matchups are concerned, maybe those guys are worth backing against guys in their similar range, which of course is 200 to 1, guys that frankly are kind of expected to miss the cut. And so if you can grab those guys, they make the cut, you might end up just cashing a head-to-head by the end of Friday because you got a guy to make the cut going up against a guy who didn't make the cut.
I like it. So we've talked about guys that you want to bet on. Who are the guys that you don't want to bet on?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, all the live guys, right? So we're going to fade a bunch of those guys to miss the cut. And the other guy is, speaking of a live guy, DJ, right? We talked about him to struggle at the PGA Championship or after he got married. Guess who just recently got married? I believe it was it Luda who was there? I forget who was in attendance. But sure. Brooks Koepka is, of course, who I'm talking about. He was on stage with, or was it Luda or was it, I don't know.
Is
not really all
Brooks
that important.
Koepka the guy that's like filming videos when he's in bed and stuff with this girl? Is that guy?
Yeah, and good for him. He got married and he likes his wife a lot. That's really cool. But I don't know that we need to necessarily see it. Brooks is always going to get credit for, come major time, right? Like Brooks, it's major time. Brooks, he's dangerous. Like da 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 da. I'm going to fade Brooks this week, right? The course fit is not really great for him. He is way down the line in the stats, and like as much as we say, man, he doesn't care about the PGA Tour events, and he's only here for the majors, and like da 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 da. Like at some point, the stats at least have to back it up. You're laughing about something. I think you're watching
because I'm watching the video.
Yeah.
Of them dancing on stage with Luda. It is
Luda. Okay, good. I'm glad this is that up.
Wow. This is wow.
Yeah. There's a lot going on. So, like, is that a guy, for example, that you're
Definitely
dying
not.
that you think is like super locked in to play well at Brookline? So, like, so you're going to get, name value. You're going to get like, he's going to be given credit at a certain price, right? Like Brooks Koepka, I'm just, firing it up here, really good radio here while I scroll up and down. 50 to 1, right? So you look at it and you go, man, he's 50 to 1, like Brooks Koepka, like he's always in the mix, like da da da. It's like, you know what? The sportsbooks are happy to put Brooks at 50 to 1 because a bunch of people are going to take Brooks at 50 to 1. But it also means that he's plus 165 to miss the cut. And honestly, Brookline's tough, man. Like none of these guys I would necessarily blame for missing the cut. So he is definitely on the list of not a live guy yet necessarily. Hopefully he doesn't, but he's not a guy that I'm looking to back here.
That wedding definitely looked like it could have taken place at Club Live, though. In fairness, totally. Let's talk about who is going to win.
Yeah. So again, like give me the Thomas McIlroy like duel. I'll try to play one of those or both of those guys over the course of the weekend at various prices, right? Thing is with the US Open, right? Double bogeys are out there, right? And so double bogeys are out there, and that's kind of the thing that you're trying to avoid, obviously. But like it also means that bogey can be a good score. Mm-hmm. And so that can also change the live odds board in a sort of non-congruent type of a way, right? Like there can be overreactions to bogeys. There can be overreactions to double bogeys, right? You watch the Masters, a guy double bogeys, it's like send him off the planet. Like you can't come back from that. At a US Open, like you can come back from an occasional double bogey because you know that the winning score, again, depending on the setup, is going to be around even par, right? A lot of these guys, when they start their day, will take even par. So we'll see sort of how it plays out. But I think you're going to be able to get those guys at a better price, right? If Justin Thomas comes out and shoots a 74 in the first round, I don't think that necessarily knocks him out because I don't think that there's going to be anybody at -6, for example, right? And so if you shoot a double bogey on your 6th hole, for example, yeah, you know what? Maybe it's time to bet on that guy, right? So the sort of thing is like if a guy is really good, listen, I'm not looking to bet Sepp Straka after he double bogeys, but like if Rory McIlroy has a double bogey early on in the tournament, like that might be the time, right, to jump on him because it can be made up because also other guys are going to make double bogey, right? If you make a double bogey at the Masters and you look around waiting for somebody else to make a double, it's probably not going to happen. If you do it at the US Open, you look around, there's a guy right behind you ready to make a double bogey, probably on that hole, maybe who you're playing with. So like I'm looking to go live there. Zalatoris, I think, is going to be in the mix, right? Just because he kind of always is. And so I'm looking to grab him. But Lowry is the guy. Shane Lowry is the guy that like I am looking at here, who's just kind of fitting all the numbers here. And it's interesting, last week he was, gained 2.5 strokes tee to green last week at the Canadian Open. And this is a guy who is so good around the greens, like his chipping. He's one of the best chippers and around the green, par saver type guys. And he was minus a stroke or just under a stroke around the green at the Canadian Open. Well, if he was his usual self, where he's sort of gaining stroke on the field, he was probably going to be in that mix with the big guns at the top of the leaderboard. I think that that's sort of a throw out type situation for Lowry, right? I trust him to be good around the greens at the US Open. He was second at PGA National in that Honda Classic that we talked about early on this in the pod. And he's 9th in strokes gained approach, right? So he's hitting greens. He's good around the greens, just not last week, which cost him some money at the Canadian Open. And he's good in majors, right? We've seen him contend in various tough condition type places, right? So I think this is a guy who isn't going to have a ton of those double bogeys. I think he's going to be able to get around, save a lot of pars, and maybe get some birdies along the way here. And where he's priced in the market, this isn't a guy who's sitting at 10-1 right now. This is a guy who is sitting in closer to like 30-1 in a lot of places, right? It's like 28 to 30-1. So like, I would be more apt to just grab that now, right? And the way I work it is sort of on a graduated system. So like I've got Lowry 28-1. We'll grab Zalatoris at 28-1. Like, let's just, use some examples of just, everyday type numbers here. You throw $10 on either of those guys, right? If they're in contention, okay, well, now we've got a bet that might pay us $280. Like, that's pretty fun. And if they're not, okay, that's cool too. But like by the time Saturday rolls around and maybe those guys both miss the cut, you can get back in on a McIlroy at plus 400, whomever at plus 300 for $20, right? And so you can make back that small investment on these, these guys aren't long shots by any stretch, but like a pretty good price. You can make that back later on in the week in some of the sort of individual betting. And by the way, if we're also successful in these top 20 markets, these bets kind of pay for themselves as well, because Lowry, again, as mentioned, he's going to be in the pluses from a pricing standpoint, which is great, because if he's 5th, we end up cashing, we end up making that money, and we only sacrificed a couple of bucks before the tournament started. So as far as tournament bets are concerned, Zalatoris and Lowry are my guys. Finau I would consider, but again, like that's a situation of like, even though Zalatoris has not won, I know that he can. Lowry has won, so I know that he can. Finau, I don't necessarily know that he can do it when like push comes to shove at the end. So I'm not looking to necessarily back him. And then people down the line there, again, we talked about the Rileys and the Pereiras. If you wanted to sprinkle some on those guys and hope that they had the week of their lives, I couldn't tell you not to. I just think they are better value in the top 20 market, expecting them to have a good week, but not necessarily be the guy hoisting the trophy at the end of it.
That's amazing, dude. Great stuff as always. But if people want to watch along with you as the weekend progresses, where can they do that online?
Yeah. So for the first time for the majors, and I did it for the Canadian Open, as sort of a dry run type situation, I'm going to do a piece for the Score looking at after 2 rounds, what are the metrics saying? Who's got the strokes gained tee to green, around the green? Who has that working? Who's gotten a little unlucky putting, right? You want to bet on guys who have been unlucky putting through the first couple of rounds. So on Friday night, we're going to have that out there. Of course, everything I do is tweeted and retweeted via @MRussAuthentic on Twitter. We're going to have all of this stuff in place here, probably by the end of the day, if not first thing on Wednesday, as far as our pre-tournament stuff. And then, like I said, little live commentary at the end of the second round. And then, of course, I'll tweet out anything that I live bet over the course of the weekend.
That's awesome stuff, my dude. As always, thank you for blessing us with the information and education, especially when it comes to golf, because I always love that education lesson for sure, because it helps me make some money. So thanks again, my dude, for stopping by. We'll catch up again down the line.
You got it. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you.
And if you want to follow me online, you can do so on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander and on Twitter at Shell Alexander. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the DRF Sports Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also rate us, review us, like us, all that other fun stuff. But for more from this new project from DRF Sports, just a little reminder. If you're unfamiliar with the letters DRF, it stands for Daily Racing Forum, which has been around for over 100 years, giving you all of the horse racing information, data, and analysis. But now we've taken over the entire sports world. So if you want coverage on every football game, as well as the NBA, MLB, college sports, and more, head to drf.com/sports for all of the details and insights, as the site has all of the data on every game, including offensive and defensive stats, betting angles, line movements, key injuries, team stats, and more. The DRF data is what powers our power trends. So if you want to see which trends our analysts have selected, follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. If you want access to all of the raw data, drf.com/sports. That's where you can find the usual previews as we deep dive into the games. Of course, we got you covered on this podcast. However you want your betting information, we've got you covered. Again, my name is Sheldon Alexander. That's all I got for now. But until next time, see ya.
Thanks for listening to the DRF Sports Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show. For more sports betting advice, go to drf.com/sports and follow on Twitter at DRF_sports.